Welcome to another CXL Feed. My name is Fred Pike, and in this lesson, we'll set up a free BigQuery account for GA4 data. No cost, no risk, no worries, and no credit card needed. So why would we want to set up a GA4 connection to BigQuery? In my mind, that connection is one of the huge advantages of GA4. In Universal Analytics, you paid a ton of money for that connection. In GA4, it's included for free. There are several reasons why I think you should make that connection. First, there's no 2 or 14-month limit on the data. And what do I mean by that? If you go into the admin section of GA4 and look at data retention, there are two settings, either 2 months or 14 months. The default is 2 months. And what this means is that beyond that limit, either the 2 or 14 months, you can't really dive deep into the data. For example, you can't run explorations after this limit. But if you have the GA4 to BigQuery connection set up, then you can. So that's a huge reason for setting up the connection. Another reason is that you own the data. Once that GA4 data is sent to BigQuery, you own it as long as you maintain that BigQuery account. Once that data is in BigQuery, you have multiple ways to do analysis. You can certainly do analysis within BigQuery itself. You can connect it to Looker Studio. You can connect it with multiple other BigQuery sources like from Google Ads or Google Search Console, for example. So there's lots of ways to do analysis from within BigQuery. BigQuery is also an inexpensive backup to your GA4 data. So there's so many reasons to make that connection. But there seem to be a couple of roadblocks in my mind on why people don't make the GA4 to BigQuery connection. The first is there's this myth, there's this thought that BigQuery is too expensive. And we have a different CXL feed that directly addresses this myth and kind of shows it is a myth. BigQuery in general is really inexpensive or free for small to medium-sized businesses. The second roadblock is that people think BigQuery is difficult to set up. And that's another myth that I want to break in this lesson and show you how easy it is to set up a BigQuery connection. What we're going to do to make sure there's absolutely no risk is we are going to set up a BigQuery sandbox account. That sandbox account is 100% free. It's limited to 60 days worth of data, so you can't use it for too long. But 60 days, you've got all the data you need to see if you want to continue using BigQuery. And it only does a daily export of GA4 data. Once you move to a paid version of BigQuery, then you'll get what's called an intraday export. So an event happens on your website, it gets sent over to BigQuery within seconds. So it's kind of like a real time in BigQuery. We're going to be using the Google Cloud Platform, which is where BigQuery is. And GCP, or the Google Cloud Platform, has a couple of different options. You can set up an individual account, which is really easy to do, or you can set up an organization account, which is a little bit more complicated and requires you to make some DNS entries. So typically, to get started, I have my clients set up an individual account. At some point, we can add an organization account, and it's really easy to move a BigQuery property from an individual instance to an organization ID. Let's go ahead and set up our free sandbox in BigQuery. That's a free account. First thing I'm going to do is look for the directions on that. And Google has some fairly nice step-by-step directions. Let's go to BigQuery. I am in a Google account that doesn't have this set up. So we're in the A to D Northwoods account. I'm going to agree. Now I'm going to create a project. We won't have an organization set up with this. We are using the individual approach to BigQuery. Success, we made it. We won't read this right now. Now you can see we are in the sandbox mode. So what does that mean? The sandbox gives us 60 days worth of data. We have full access to BigQuery. We can connect our GA4 data to it, but we don't have to pay anything at all during this period. We can upgrade if we want to, which I think we will want to. But this is the no risk, no cost, no credit card version of BigQuery, the sandbox approach. At the point we'll want to upgrade, we can simply upgrade by clicking here or we can also take advantage of their free trial with up to $300 in credit. It's unlikely you'll use that $300, but it's always nice to have that in reserve. Now that we have the sandbox set up in BigQuery, let's connect our analytics account to it, which is really the purpose of this whole thing, right? So we're going to use one of my demo sites, the Shusha Dog Store. This is the e-commerce site run by my dog, and just to get some traffic going, since there usually isn't a lot of activity on this site, since it's actually a demo site, I'm just going to move around some. I'm going to add some stuff to the cart, and that is going to create some GA4 events, which will ultimately get transferred to BigQuery. So if we go into the analytics for the Shusha Dog Shop, we can see that we have some activity happening. And if we look at what's happened recently, I see there's actually some people coming here from Poland and from Austria. So people from all around the world are coming to the Shusha Dog Store. So that's great. So how are we going to connect this to BigQuery? We're going to do that in admin. And we're going to go into the product links and the BigQuery links. And we're going to link to a project, a BigQuery project that we have access to, the one we just created. So here is the one that we just created. We're going to confirm that. Specify the region that we're in. We are only going to set up daily exports because we can't do the intraday. The intraday is like real time in BigQuery. As soon as an event happens on the website, it shows up in GA4 in real time, it gets sent to BigQuery as well. But you can only do that with a billing account. We are going to send a daily export to our sandbox account. We won't do anything with the user data. We'll click next. Everything looks good here. We're going to submit it. Now the link is created, and we have to wait about 24 hours for this data to show up. Let's check in 24 hours later and look at the GA4 data that is now showing up in BigQuery. And there's one important detail I want to tell you about the tables that are set up. If we open up BigQuery, we see our property, and now we have an analytics data set with one event table. So we have 1 day's worth of information. If we click on that and look at the preview, we can see the GA4 events we created yesterday. First visit, session start, page view, etc. So we know that the connection was made and we're seeing the data show up. That's awesome. The one thing I want to make sure you know, since we are in sandbox mode with that 60-day limitation, if we look at the details of the table, we can see that the table is going to expire 60 days from when we set up that data. If you're going to upgrade, what you're going to have to do for each day, for each daily table, is set the expiration time to none and then save that. And you won't be able to do it while you're in sandbox mode because you don't have the billing account set up. But you'll have to do what I just showed you after you set up a billing account. And I'm pretty sure you're going to want to set up a billing account at some point. The other thing that's really important to look at this table is our active logical bytes and our long-term logical bytes. This number is what you'll use to estimate how big your storage needs will be in BigQuery. And that's covered in a different CXL feed. Let's wrap up our lesson. In the US, there's a saying that the best day to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best day is today. And that same logic applies to BigQuery and GA4. BigQuery starts collecting data from GA4 the day you make that connection. There's no way to backfill that information. So the sooner you make the connection from GA4 into BigQuery, the better off you'll be. Even if you start off in the sandbox, you're starting to collect that GA4 information, and then you can upgrade the sandbox to the paid version. So go ahead right now, today, right after watching this, set up your BigQuery sandbox and make the connection to GA4. You will never regret it.